After leaving the restaurant, Suyang walked a straight path through the streets until he reached the other end of the city, where the exit gate was stationed. When he reached the gate, Suyang noticed a large group of people and a few carriages waiting right outside the gate. They were all equipped with weapons and armors, looking as though they were about to enter a battle. There were even a few people in robes that looked to be disciples of some sect mixed in with the crowd. By the time Suyang passed the guards and stepped out of the city, the majority of the crowd was already looking at him with many different kinds of gazes. Some gazes were filled with envy and others looked at him with disdain. But of course, there were also a few females there that looked at him with adoring lights in their eyes. Under the gazes of over 50 people, Suyang calmly walked the road, his expression as tranquil as a still lake. He didn't care what they were doing, nor was he interested. However, his ears couldn't help but pick up the whispers of the crowd. Isn't that a disciple from the Profound Blossom Sect? The only shameless sect that chooses its disciple by their looks first and talent second? Yeah, that sect. All they do is screw each other day and night without proper training, hence why they usually have a high cultivation base but zero experience in combat. They only cultivate for their looks, so they wouldn't care even if they only have high cultivation bases and nothing else. Suyang acted as though he didn't hear anything when the disciples from another sect within the crowd spoke badly about his sect, but he was laughing deep inside. While their words were harsh, there was actually some truth behind it. The Profound Blossom Sect was known for their beautiful people, vulgar practices, and high cultivation base. However, the majority of its disciple had little to no experience when it came to techniques for combat, at least that was true within the outer court. From what Suyang received from his memories and what he personally witnessed in the outer court disciples are usually so focused on increasing their own cultivation base that they barely bother to train in real techniques used for combat. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that most outer court disciples would rather spend their time in bed with their partner than to actually pick up a sword and train until they sweat. Suddenly, somebody from the front shouted out loud, causing everybody to look at him. It was a bulky man with a bald head. "All right. Everybody, we are ready to travel to the Thunder Valley. If you are not ready by now, then you should just go back home." Some of the crowd laughed at the bulky man's words. "If you have any questions, now is the time to ask." "How long will the journey to the Thunder Valley take?" asked a skinny man with a bow in his hands. 5 days, give or take." "Do you have any idea how many lightning cats will be there for us to slay?" "We are unsure of the exact number, but they are in the hundreds at least," said the bulky man, and he continued, "Listen here. There will be a lot of lightning cats running around and it will be a difficult subjugation. However, this just means that there will be more wealth for all of us to share afterward." A thundering battle cry suddenly resounded, causing Suyang's hairs to tremble. What a lousy crowd! Suyang thought to himself, and he looked at the paper in his hands. This mission seems to be bigger than expected. It has been some time since Suyang left the Swift Feather City. He calmly walked down the middle of the wide path with his hands behind his back, looking as though he was taking a stroll in a park. He was looking left and right, seemingly interested in Mother Nature. Behind him was a large group of 50 people, all of them watching Suyang in the lead with weird expressions. "Why does it look like we're all being led by that dog?" someone from the crowd purposely said out loud. "Now that you mention it. Why are we walking at his pace? We can't go any faster because we are already cramped as it is. This is unacceptable. We won't make it there by next week at this rate. Hey, brat in the white robes. Get out of the way before we run you over." The bulky man shouted in his obnoxiously loud voice. Hearing the loud commotion coming from the back, Suyang turned his head around and glanced at the crowd. However, he didn't stop walking and returned to looking at the front after a single glance. His simple yet arrogant action instantly angered many in the crowd. "You fucking brat! Are you picking a fight with all of us by yourself? Simply courting death. Suyang didn't bother turning around for the second time and continued to walk at a casual pace. Everybody within the crowd was at least at the 7th level of the elementary spirit realm, with a few of them at the early profound spirit realm. Such a large group radiated an overwhelming pressure that would easily scare anyone weak-hearted, yet in Suyang's eyes, they were only a bunch of fools with loud mouths. HMPH. Let's see if you dare ignore me after I start swinging my axe at you. The bulky man stepped forward and approached Suyang with a wide steel axe in his grasp. It was at this moment Suyang suddenly stopped walking and turned around to face the crowd. I won't tell you to not swing that toy at me, but just thou know that you will not step foot inside the Thunder Valley once you do. Ever. Suyang said in a low and calm voice, his face still as tranquil as ever. However, his low-sounding voice was as loud as a fly buzzing directly in the ears of the bulky man. What did you just say to me, you fucking brat? The bulky man's forehead began popping with veins the moment he heard Suyang's threat, his face red from anger. Suyang smiled and said, "You heard me." He then turned around and began walking again. When Suyang turned around and walked, the bulky man exploded in anger, his eyes red. The bulky man was a cultivator at the 3rd level of the profound spirit realm, and he has never been so deeply disrespected by anyone, let alone a disciple from the Shameless Profound Blossom Sect. You fucking brat. Who do you think you are? The bulky man suddenly pounced at Suyang from a distance like a tiger with his steel axe raised high into the air. The steel axe quickly dropped towards Suyang's head. However, just inches before the axe could touch even a strand of hair on his head, Suyang made a swift turn and unsheathed the sword by his side. A flicker of light flashed, followed by a tyrannical pressure that was filled with killing intent. Once the crowd behind the bulky man felt the killing intent, their legs stopped working and their bodies trembled as though it was freezing cold. Although the pressure only lasted for a brief second before it disappeared, it was enough to halt the movements of everybody there, even the horses pulling the carriages. Instantly after the killing intent passed, the bulky man's frozen body in the air began moving again. It began falling backward like a stone statue. The body fell slowly and felt like it took forever in the witnesses' eyes, but when it finally touched the ground, everybody there was shocked to find the head missing from the bulky man's body. A few people from the crowd suddenly looked up into the sky after they saw a shadow spinning in the air. When they noticed that it was actually the bulky man's head that was spinning in the air, they screamed in horror, not to mention the flying head still had the angry expression of the bulky man before his death. Suyang retrieved his sword at the same moment the flying head touched the ground. He then looked at the bewildered crowd calmly with a bright smile and said, "Since we are all going to the same place with the same objective, why don't we stop this foolishness before I start littering this road with corpses? Though I wouldn't mind warming up before I start hunting at the Thunder Valley." The crowd slowly nodded to his suggestion while swallowing hard. They have never met someone as menacing as this young man from the Profound Blossom Sect before. It felt to them as though they were standing in front of the devil himself. Good. Suyang also nodded. Then let's make this journey worthwhile. He turned around and began walking again. Suyang's figure quickly disappeared from the crowd's view. When they confirmed that Suyang was truly gone, the group of people fell to their butts, their body covered in sweat. Who the hell was that? I have never heard of such a frightening existence belonging to the Profound Blossom Sect. Who was it that said he was just an outer court disciple? He's clearly powerful enough to become an inner court disciple even in my sect. No, even becoming a core disciple is possible. The group soon continued their journey despite their leader's sudden death. It was not as though they can just go home after coming all the way out here, not to mention the wealth they could obtain from slaying lightning cats. This is a world where the strong eats the weak. It isn't uncommon for a powerful individual like the bulky man to die from defeat, as there would always be someone stronger. 4 days quickly passed. Suyang has been walking for 4 days without rest, yet he seemed perfectly fine, almost as if he was full of energy. He suddenly noticed an expensive-looking carriage in the distance. It was surrounded by many armored men on horses. The carriage was entirely made out of gold and expensive jade, giving it an exquisite aura, as though it belonged to royalty. Above the carriage was an old man in a grey robe, who was sitting there cross-legged, seemingly in cultivation. Although Suyang was unable to detect the old man's cultivation base, he was able to guess it just from his experience alone. Heavenly Spirit Realm. What could someone at his level be doing here, sitting on top of a carrier like some kind of guard? He wondered. What about the person sitting inside the carriage? Who could possibly have enough status to keep a Heavenly Spirit Realm expert as a guard in this mortal world when they are considered masters at the apex? Suyang was intrigued by the golden carriage and its heavy guard, but he wasn't someone who'd stick his nose into places it doesn't belong, so he only ignored it and silently walked behind it. After some time, the guards finally noticed Suyang following them. "Senior, should we do something about that kid? He's been following us for quite some time now," said one of the armored guards. The old man slowly opened his eyes, and he turned his gaze to look at Suyang. However, when he tried to probe him, the old man was surprised to find out that he was unable to see his real cultivation, feeling like he was looking at a cloud of human-figured smoke. However, despite Suyang's mysterious presence, the old man did not feel any threat or malicious feeling towards him. "Ignore him," he said a moment later. The guards nodded and no longer thought about approaching Suyang. However, they were still paying attention to him just in case he starts acting suspiciously. What an interesting young man. The old man smiled to himself before closing his eyes again. After walking for a few more hours without any hurdles, the golden carriage suddenly came to a stop. The guard narrowed their gazes at the shadowy figure in the front, and the old man slowly stood up. Seeing this sudden development, Suyang also halted his steps. The shadowy figure was clad in full black robes with only his 2 black eyeballs exposed, looking like an assassin. However, a real assassin wouldn't reveal himself this openly and obviously. "Is this some kind of joke?" The old man opened his mouth to ask the shadowy figure. "The Moonlight Blades had sent you, a single Earth Spirit Realm expert here, despite being aware of my presence?" The shadowy figure chuckled and said in a hoarse-sounding voice, "I am only here to pass on a message to the young lady inside that carriage on the behalf of my king. If you do not obediently hand over the 100 poisons body by the time the next full moon is present, then we will have no choice but to take it by force," said the shadowy figure. When the soldiers on the horses heard the message, their eyes radiated with anger. "How imprudent! Have you forgotten who we are? Even if the Moonlight Blades were to attack us with full force, you wouldn't even get past the front gate," one of the guards shouted loudly. "How dare you threaten the young lady? It will only be a matter of time before we find your hideout and wipe you out," said another guard. "Ha ha ha!" The shadowy figure burst out laughing. "Of course, if we were to fight you head-on, our Moonlight Blades would stand no chance. However, who do you think we are? You should know better than anyone else that we will never fight fists with fists." Suyang silently listened to the conversation being held by the 2 parties, both of them with a seemingly profound background. Although he has never heard of the Moonlight Blades before, they seem to be some sort of faction that lives in the shadow. The 100 Poisons body, huh? Suyang pondered the name. "Is that all you have to say?" said the old man, who has been silent this whole time. "If that's all, then you may die now." The old man suddenly retrieved a paper fan from inside his robe and gently waved it at the direction of the shadowy figure. A powerful ripple appeared from the paper fan the moment the old man waved it, causing it to fly towards the shadowy figure. However, before the ripple could touch him, the shadowy figure disappeared from where he stood like a ghost, and where he just stood exploded an instant later. The old man suddenly turned to look at Suyang and shouted, "Watch out!" Knowing that I would die today, I had planned to take a few of your guards with me before I die. However, this kid's face is very annoying to look at, so be gracious that I will take his life instead. The shadowy figure suddenly appeared behind Suyang with a black dagger in his grasp raised and ready to strike. However, unfortunately for the shadowy figure, Suyang's grasp was already on the sword handle by his side before the shadowy figure even disappeared. A profound and fierce light flashed within Suyang's eyes, and an overwhelming amount of sword intent exploded from within his body, causing the shadowy figure to freeze for an instant from the sudden pressure. The instant the shadowy figure was frozen from shock, Suyang swiftly turned around and unsheathed his sword, sending a powerful wave of sword intent towards the shadowy figure. The shadowy figure couldn't even scream in pain before the sword intent effortlessly sliced his body in half like a sword cutting a piece of paper. After cutting the shadowy figure in half, Suyang coldly snorted at the corpse on the floor. "Did you think that I wouldn't notice your obnoxious gaze staring at me? This is not the first time something like this has happened before." The guards and the old man watched Suyang return his sword into its scabbard with shocked expressions. What just happened? At one moment the shadowy figure disappeared from their views and an instant later he became a corpse with his body cleanly sliced in half, laying beside that young man who has been suspiciously following them. Sword intent. When the guards finally returned from their astonishment, they realized that it was sword intent that the young man had used to kill the shadowy figure. What terrifying sword intent! Even the heavenly spirit realm old man was shocked by the destructive power and pressure shown by the sword intent. It was something even a heavenly spirit realm expert like him would not be able to replicate. The old man jumped off the carriage and approached Suyang. "Young man, what is your name?" he asked. "Zhou. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?" Suyang did not instantly answer and instead silently looked at the old man, seemingly in deep thoughts. When the old man saw his calm expression, he smiled and said, "I was immensely impressed by your sword intent, but your appearance makes it difficult for me to see you as a mere junior. What does my age matter? The only thing that matters in a fight is one's strength and wisdom. Anything else is irrelevant." Suyang's words left the old man speechless. "Senior Zhang. Is everything fine out there?" A sweet feminine voice resounded from inside the golden carriage, causing the old man to turn around. "Young lady, the threat is no longer here," said the old man named Senior Zhang. "Then let's continue our journey. We don't have much time to spare here." Senior Zhang looked at Suyang with a bitter smile. "Although I wish to talk more to you about your sword intent, we are in a hurry. I am Senior Zhang from the Divine Sword Temple. If you ever happen to have the chance to visit, you can show anyone there this and they will bring you to me." Senior Zhang handed Suyang a yellow jade slip. "If I get the chance." Suyang casually accepted the jade slip. When Suyang showed no reactions after he mentioned the Divine Sword Temple, Senior Zhang was slightly surprised. Was it ignorance, or was the name Divine Sword Temple not enough to even lift his brows? Senior Zhang became more interested in Suyang's background, but alas, he did not have the time to stay around to learn more about him. After their short interaction, Senior Zhang went into the carriage before they began moving again. Inside the carriage, Senior Zhang sat in front of a female figure, her face covered by a veil. "The moonlight blades are really relentless," sighed the veiled figure. The sigh was so heartfelt that Senior Zhang could feel the exhaustion in her heart. "The young lady does not have to worry. We will find their hideout soon and wipe them from this earth," said Senior Zhang. His voice was clear and filled with confidence, yet his eyes were dim. The Moonlight Blades could be considered the most secretive and deadly underground organization to have ever existed in this world. They are so well hidden that even after 100 years of active operations, nobody has been able to unveil their main hideout, only minor branches. "I'm sure you will," said the young lady in a tender voice, and she continued, "Thank you, Senior Zhang. I did not do anything to be deserving of your praises." He shook his head, refusing her gratitude. "But you protected me just now." Senior Zhang chuckled slightly and said, "I would naturally protect the young lady, however, I really did not do anything just now. The one who dealt with the assassin was a young man." "A young man?" The young lady sounded intrigued, and Senior Zhang began recalling to her what had happened. "The assassin came here to deliver the message knowing that he will die afterward, and he had intended to deal some damage to us. But at the last second, he decided to surprise attack this young man instead." "Why was he attacked? Is he okay?" When Senior Zhang recalled what the assassin had said, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Because his face was annoying. The young lady covered her mouth from surprise after hearing his words. A bystander was attacked solely for the reason that he had an annoying face. What kind of development was this? As for his well-being, not only did he manage to escape unharmed, but he also turned the situation around and killed the assassin with sword intent. Sword intent? That terrifying sword intent I felt just now didn't belong to Senior Zhang? She asked in a puzzled tone. Senior Zhang shook his head in regret and said, "I wouldn't be able to emit such powerful sword intent even if I tried." The young lady was truly in shock now. She knew Senior Zhang's demeanor very well, and his capabilities as a sword master could be considered top-notch even amongst masters. But for him to sound so disheartened and inferior when speaking about himself was a first. "This young man, who is he?" "I don't know his background, only his name, Suyang. Although he looks like a teenager, his demeanor says otherwise. If I had to guess, then he must be some revered sword master in disguise." "Suyang. Is he still out there right now? Why don't you invite him inside to have a talk?" The young lady's words surprised Senior Zhang. "But we don't know his background. While I can't sense any threat from him, I don't think it would be a good idea to have him so close to the young lady. I am interested in this sword master who even our esteemed Senior Zhang cannot comprehend. And since he's strong enough to kill someone from the Moonlight Blades, I'd like to at least create some kind of connection between us." After a moment of silence, Senior Zhang nodded and left the carriage. Outside the carriage, Suyang was still trying to recall the name 100 Poison's body mentioned by the assassin. "Ah. I remember now. It is a royal-grade heavenly constitution. Anyone with the 100 Poison's body would be immune to all poisons at the mortal rank." Suyang finally recalled why he found the name so familiar. Heavenly constitutions are special bodies that grant the person with it unique and sometimes heaven-defying talents, such as the 100 Poison body that allows the person to be immune to all poison and even cultivate with it. Those with heavenly constitutions are all considered heaven-sent prodigies and are usually cultivated at a young age with all sorts of valuable resources and miracle medicines. Heavenly constitutions, like techniques and weapons, have their own levels of rarity and quality. The 100 Poison's body, for example, was at the royal grade, the lowest grade in the heavenly constitution rankings, whilst the superior 1000 Poison's body would be an imperial grade heavenly constitution. A royal grade heavenly constitution, huh? Suyang gaze narrowed at the carriage. Suddenly, Senior Zhang came out of the carriage and approached Suyang again. "Young man, my young lady would like to invite you into the carriage for a little talk. She wants to personally thank you for dealing with the assassin," Senior Zhang said to him in a different tone than previously. Suyang looked at Senior Zhang's serious face and took another quick glance at the carriage. Very well. He accepted their offer. When the guards noticed Suyang follow Senior Zhang into the carriage, their jaws dropped from shock. How could Senior Zhang let some stranger into the carriage when their young lady was also inside? However, as much as they wanted to complain and block Suyang, none of them dared to open their mouth when they recalled the prowess he showed, not to mention Senior Zhang being beside him. Once Suyang entered the carriage, he was greeted by an elegant figure clad in red robes sitting on one side of the carriage. Although he couldn't see her face, his vast experience told him that she was definitely a great beauty. On the other hand, when the young lady saw Suyang's handsome face for the first time, she was greatly surprised by his appearance, even fascinated. When Senior Zhang talked about him, he didn't mention anything about Suyang being this handsome of a young man, which dumbfounded the young lady for a second when she saw him, as she wasn't expecting someone this handsome. Suyang sat on the other side of the carriage beside Senior Zhang with a nonchalant expression on his face, seemingly unfazed by the situation. "You must be the great sword master, Zhou. My surname is Xingfeng. I have heard about you from Senior Zhang, and I'd like to personally thank you for dealing with that assassin from the Moonlight Blades," said the young lady with her fair hand extended for a handshake. Suyang chuckled inside when she called him a sword master. "You don't have to thank me. I did what I did only to protect myself," he said as he shook her hands that were soft and smooth. Senior Zhang was secretly shocked when he saw Xingfeng extend her hands out for a handshake, as it was something unthinkable for someone of her status. He wanted to say something, but alas, Suyang's quick movements allowed him to touch her hands before he could even open his mouth. Xingfeng looked at their handshake with a somewhat dazed expression. She didn't know why she willingly extended her arms for a handshake. It was almost as though her body moved without thinking. "It's my first time feeling the skin of a male that's not in my family," she thought to herself as the feeling of Suyang's warm hand gently held her hand. Perhaps it was because of Suyang's natural charm and presence, but Xingfeng didn't know why she reached out her hands to him. Even Senior Zhang was surprised to see his young lady, who has a tendency to stay away from others, willingly offer her skin for another to feel. My hand," Suyang said a moment later when Xingfeng didn't release her grasp after some time. "Ah. Where are my manners? I apologize for that." Xingfeng quickly retrieved her hand with a blushing face when she realized that she had been holding his hands for an extended amount of time. Her actions caused Senior Zhang to widen his eyes from shock. What on earth is going on in here? Where did all her elegance go? It all seemed to have disappeared the moment she saw Suyang. "Ahem." Xingfeng cleared her throat. "Senior brother Zhou, if you don't mind me asking, where are you from?" she then asked. Ignoring the way she addressed him with intimacy, Suyang casually lifted his arm into the air to show her the blossom arts on his sleeves. "I am from the Profound Blossom Sect," he said. "The Profound Blossom Sect?" Xingfeng showed a puzzled expression behind her veil. She has never heard of such a place before. Senior Zhang also showed a questioning expression. Not even he has heard of such a place. However, for them to have such a profound sword master within their ranks, how could he not have heard of them before? "We are not from around here, so I do not know of such a place. Unfortunately," said Xingfeng in a regrettable tone. "However, for them to have someone as powerful as you, it must surely be a special place." Suyang smiled and shook his head. "It really isn't as impressive as you'd think. In fact, if I could leave, I would." Senior Zhang's eyes shone with a bright and sharp light when he heard Suyang's words, and he said, "Then how about joining my Divine Sword Sect? We would greatly appreciate a talented sword master such as yourself to join our ranks. I am sure that the disciples there would also appreciate having a new master who could teach them about sword intents. I appreciate the offer, but there are still things I have to do there. Once I am done, perhaps I could travel to this Divine Sword Sect." Suyang kindly refused his offer without refusing it entirely. Senior Zhang was a bit surprised. For someone to refuse the Divine Sword Sect so quickly, this was a first even for him. Could this profound blossom sect really be this profound? However, he wasn't entirely disheartened because Suyang did not entirely refuse his offer, even hinting that he might join them in the future. Then until you finish your business there, we will wait patiently. Just know that our Divine Sword Sect will always have our doors open for anyone talented in the sword, he said a moment later. Senior brother Zhou, you seem very young, even younger than me. How old are you, exactly? Although it was hidden from sight, Zhang eyes flashed with an anticipating light. Suyang only smiled at her question and did not give her a proper reply. They seemed to be really interested in his age. However, he wasn't willing to reveal that at the moment as it might be too shocking for them. After all, what kind of 16-year-old could use sword intent that was superior to even a heavenly spirit realm expert's sword intent? Not even prodigies could possibly manage such a feat. Seeing how Suyang didn't want to reveal his age, Zhang was disappointed in her heart. What about you, senior brother Zhou? Surely you have a lot of questions to ask, especially after experiencing that unfortunate event. Zhang decided to treat her previous question as though it never happened, as she didn't want the atmosphere to turn awkward. Senior Zhang felt that it was extremely rude for Suyang to ignore her question, as it would be considered blasphemy if he knew of her background. But seeing how Zhang decided to ignore it, he also decided to do the same. There has been something on my mind after that minor event. Suyang narrowed his eyes at Zhang's alluring figure, and he continued, your heavenly constitution, the 100 poisons body. Question mark. Before Suyang could even finish his question, Senior Zhang's eyes widened with alert, and his aura radiated with killing intent as his hands instinctively reached for Suyang's open neck with a clawing gesture, like an eagle grabbing its prey. However, just before he could touch Suyang, Zhang's thundering voice resounded, halt. Senior Zhang's movements instantly froze, his clawed hand mere millimeters away from choking Suyang's pale neck, who didn't even flinch the slightest from his sudden attack. Suyang sat there silently, his expression still as calm as ever, looking as though he was not even a bit concerned about the situation. He suddenly closed his eyes and said in a calm voice, as rare as your heavenly constitution may be in this world, I do not have the slightest interest in your royal grade 100 poisons body. Even if it grants the person absolute resistance to all poison, its ability is, unfortunately, limited to mortal grade poisons. It'd be useless once you encounter a spirit grade poison. Suyang's words dumbfounded both Senior Zhang, who was still prepared to continue his attack, and Zhang, who was an expert in the art of poisons. If you are not interested, then why are you mentioning it? Asked Senior Zhang in a serious voice, sounding as though he was questioning a suspect who is behind bars. It's just that it is my first time seeing someone with a heavenly constitution here, so I got curious and wanted to ask if I can take a look at it. When Suyang said here, there was a profound and mysterious feeling to it. Of course, this wasn't his first time seeing someone with a heavenly constitution, as every partner he had in his previous life had heaven-defying heavenly constitutions. However, as for this world's heavenly constitution, this would truly be his first time seeing one, and he wanted to confirm whether or not it was the same as the heavenly constitutions from his previous life. Why you want to look at her heavenly constitution? How shameless and bold of you. Do you have any idea what kind of nonsense you are asking? Are you courting death? When Senior Zhang heard Suyang's insane request, he nearly pounced at him with open jaw. Even Zhang couldn't help but blush behind the veil covering her face, as this was the first time someone has ever dared to be so bold in front of her. For Suyang to ask her if he could see her heavenly constitution, he was basically asking her if he could see her 100 poisons body. In other words, He wanted to see her naked body. Suyang looked at Senior Zhang's disgusted expression with a frown. What are you talking about? Why, but you clearly just asked to look at her heavenly constitution. I sure did. He nodded without a second thought. Senior Zhang's face turned red from anger. He felt that Suyang was trying to make him look like a fool. To look at her heavenly constitution means to look at her bare body. How shameless do you have to be to ask the young lady that? If the young lady didn't stop me, I would have already killed you. Suyang looked at him with wide eyes. Her bare body? You must surely be jesting. I am merely asking her to show me her palms so I can take a look at her meridians. Who said anything about looking at her body? He said in a surprised tone, sounding as though he was truly innocent in this matter. Though, I wouldn't mind going through the trouble to use that method. Senior Zhang nearly puked up a mouthful of blood after hearing his words. If Zi Xingfeng wasn't sitting in front of them, he would have already slapped him a few times by now. Young lady. I shall refuse his audacious request for you, he said in a stern voice. Suyang shrugged his shoulders and said, then my business here is done. Albeit a bit short, it was nice talking to you, but I will be taking my leave now, as my destination is just ahead. You are heading to the Thunder Valley? Senior Zhang asked him in a surprised tone. The strongest beasts there would be around the profound spirit realm, so why would someone as powerful as Suyang, who has the capabilities to kill someone at the Earth spirit realm with ease, want to go there? Just a small mission. Then, if you'll excuse me. Wait. Just as Suyang was about to open the door to leave, Zi Xingfeng suddenly called for him. However, Zi Xingfeng herself did not know why she stopped him, as she would normally never ask someone who wanted to leave to stay. It's just my palm, right? Even if it was to protect yourself, the fact that you assisted us in dealing with the Moonlight blades does not change, said Zi Xingfeng as she extended her fair hands for him again. Young lady. That kind of physical contact would be absolutely inappropriate for someone of your standing. We have already shaken hands, this wouldn't be much different. But young lady. You heard the young lady, old man. Suyang suddenly grabbed Zi Xingfeng's hands in one smooth motion, which greatly startled her who wasn't fully prepared. Old man? Senior Zhang almost couldn't believe his ears. Ever since he was young, there had never been anyone who dared to address him in such a tone. After grabbing Zi Xingfeng's hands again, Suyang closed his eyes and became silent. Suddenly, his body emitted a profound aura, causing the atmosphere to feel somewhat ancient. The unexpected change caused both Senior Zhang and Zi Xingfeng to feel apprehensive. The carriage suddenly became so quiet that only the sound of the horses and the carriage moving could be heard. This quiet atmosphere lasted for a few moments. When Suyang opened his eyes again, he showed a somewhat relieved smile. It's the same. He mumbled in low voice. What's the same? Asked Zi Xingfeng. It's just as I remembered it. I had thought that it would be different than how I imagined it, but it looks like that was unnecessary worry, he said after a small pause. After analyzing Zi Xingfeng's heavenly constitution, Suyang confirmed that its structure and functions are the same as the heavenly constitution that he was familiar with in his previous life. Learning this, Suyang was in a joyous mood, as this discovery meant that there was a chance that he was still in the same universe but in a different world. Perhaps this is a world separated from the four worlds? A fifth world? He pondered. Suyang looked at Zi Xingfeng directly at her veil and smiled. Thank you for listening to my selfish request, he said in a clear voice. Zi Xingfeng couldn't help but feel that Suyang was able to see through the veil and straight into her eyes when he looked at her, and she smiled. It's only a small matter, there is no need to be so humble. Although it may be a small matter to you, it is something of great importance to me. As a show of my gratitude to you, I shall part to you the method to cultivate the 100 poisons body into the imperial grade 1000 poisons body. The already silent place suddenly turned even quieter, and both Senior Zhang and Zhang stared at Suyang with wide eyes filled with shock, especially Zhang, who was barely able to think properly at this moment. What did he just say? That not only does he have the method to cultivate my 100 poisons body into the 1,000 poisons body, but he is also willing to give me such a priceless technique? Why? Zhang stared at him with wide eyes behind her veil. She has never been this shocked before in her entire life. The method to cultivate my 100 poisons body into 1,000 poisons body? Could a technique like that really exist under this heaven? If so, then why would you give it to someone like me, someone you've only just met? Zhang asked with a trembling voice. Despite her colossal background and her family's enormous wealth, she couldn't help but tremble in excitement at this technique that may or may not even exist. There's no point in keeping it for myself since I do not have 100 poisons body, so I might as well give it to someone that actually has a use for it. I am no saint, but it will always be a personal pleasure of mine to make beautiful ladies, one such as yourself, happy, especially if it only takes a few small gifts. Suyang replied in a calm voice, sounding as though he really did not care that he was going to share such a priceless technique to some stranger. Beautiful lady? The feeling that Suyang could see through her veil became stronger in Zhang's heart. Only a small gift? Senior Zhang nearly fell unconscious when Suyang called a technique that could cultivate one's heavenly constitution into a higher grade a mere small gift. In fact, he was so dumbfounded that he missed the obvious flirting that was happening right in front of his wide eyes. Are you sure? Surely, something this precious, you must. No need to be so humble, I am also doing this for myself. Come, lean your head towards my way. Although she felt overwhelmed by the sudden development, as though his words were said with magic in it, Zhang obediently listened to his words and leaned forward. When she leaned forward, Suyang also followed. He closed his eyes and gently touched her forehead that was still covered with a veil with his own forehead, not to mention her flowery fragrance that calmed his mind. Zhang, on the other hand, could feel her face heating up from embarrassment. This was her first time being so close to another man's face with her own. It was close enough that she might accidentally kiss him if she moved forward even the slightest. A few seconds after their foreheads connected, a bright yellow glow could be seen in between their foreheads, slowly growing larger and brighter as time passed, and a few minutes felt like a few hours to Zhang, who was currently trying to absorb all of the information being fed into her head by Suyang. Her body began sweating, and her breathing quickened. When Senior Zhang saw the changes to Zhang, he wanted to interrupt them. However, fearing that he might distract them and cause irreversible damages to her, he decided to sit back and bite his jaw with as much strength as he could muster and patiently wait for the two to finish whatever they were doing. Immortal grade tempering technique, 1,000 poisons tempering? She cried inside her heart. When Zhang finally learned the name and grade of the technique, she was nearly shocked into a coma. There are countless techniques in this world that offer countless varieties of skills and different effects, each divided into different grades and categories depending on the technique's power and versatility. From the weakest and least powerful techniques to the heaven-defying techniques that could destroy mountains, they are ranked: mortal grade, earth grade, heaven grade, and lastly, the immortal grade, which was considered the highest attainable rarity for techniques in this mortal world. To put in perspective how rare and valuable immortal grade techniques are in this world, one could use the 10 fingers on their 2 hands to count all of the known immortal grade techniques in this world and still have spare fingers to use for counting. Hell, forget about the unobtainable by most immortal grade techniques. Even heaven-grade techniques are considered national treasures in powerful sects and are kept secured under strict supervision. Unless one belonged to a great family that ruled an entire region in the eastern continent or some super sect like the Divine Sword Sect, They can forget about ever seeing any immortal-grade technique up close and personal. When Suyang finally finished transferring the technique into Zhang's mind, he slowly pulled his head away from her forehead. I have transferred the technique directly into your mind so you can bring it up and look at it whenever you want. However, keep in mind that you will not be able to share it with anyone no matter how hard you try, so save yourself from pointless sweating, said Suyang a few moments later. Ha! Ha! Zhang panted heavily, sounding as though she just finished sprinting a marathon. This gift. How am I supposed to repay you? Even if I give you everything in my possession, it will not amount to even half the value of this technique. Like I'd said, I am doing this not just for you but also for my own selfish reasons. And you can repay me by successfully cultivating your 100 poisons body into the 1,000 poisons body. Something like that is. Zhang was speechless. She couldn't understand Suyang's actions or guess his thoughts no matter how hard she tried. It was as though she was trying to see something deeply shrouded in a thick fog. A genius such as yourself, who is at the Earth Spirit Realm at such a young age, will surely be successful when cultivating the technique. Suyang suddenly turned his head to look at the carriage ceiling, and he continued, It seems like I have finally arrived at my destination. Although this meeting was short, it was filled with excitement, even a bit of fate's aura. Zhang silently stared at Suyang, seemingly in a daze. Open the carriage door. Senior Zhang suddenly shouted, his voice hasty sounding, almost as though he wanted Suyang to leave the carriage as soon as possible. The door to the carriage opened, and Suyang quickly stepped out of the carriage. Wait. Senior brother Zhou. Zhang looked like she was about to leave the carriage to follow him but was quickly stopped by Senior Zhang before she could even reach the door. Young lady, His Majesty gave me strict orders to not let you leave this carriage, or else the protection that was bestowed onto it will not be able to protect you from danger. But I still have a lot of things I need to talk to him about. She insisted on leaving the carriage. Young lady, don't forget your standing. Although his swordsmanship is above even mine, he is only a mere commoner from the eastern continent. You cannot involve yourself too deeply with someone like that, or it will bring endless trouble, not just to yourself, but also that Zhou Yang. If it is as he said, that this meeting was fate, then you will surely meet him again in the future, said Senior Zhang, who did not know what kind of technique Suyang gave her. Zhang finally gave up on leaving the carriage to chase after Suyang after hearing those words. Start the carriage! Shouted Senior Zhang a few seconds later, and the carriage began moving. Suyang took one good look at the golden carriage from the outside before turning to face the valley in front of him that had a sky that was covered in thunder clouds from where he stood to the horizons. This is the Thunder Valley, huh? Right outside the Thunder Valley before entering the trees that filled the horizon, dozens of people camped outside. Most had injuries on their body, some even with lost limbs. There were disciples from random sects and the rest being mercenaries. Everybody there had one goal, which was to hunt lightning cats for their monster core, valuable and profound resources cultivators use to cultivate themselves. Monster cores are what beasts use to cultivate and store their cultivation base. If a beast with a solid cultivation base died, they would have a chance of leaving behind a monster core with their remaining cultivation base inside that cultivators could use to cultivate themselves. Monster cores could also be used to create powerful weapons that greatly boosts the strength of its wielder, hence its high demand and value. Suyang casually walked towards the entrance of the Thunder Valley with the sound of lightning strikes constantly roaring in the background. When he reached the camps, the people there started at him with odd gazes. He is going in there alone? Does he have a death wish? He must be really confident. I will give him 2 hours before he returns with tears in his eyes. I bet you that he won't return. Ever. A few individuals there laughed at Suyang, who was walking into the Thunder Valley without any alert on his face. They have seen too many overconfident individuals enter with similar faces like Suyang only to return with grave injuries after being here for many days. Inside the Thunder Valley, Suyang was surrounded by mountains, tall grass, and trees. And besides the random thundering in the background, it was relatively quiet in the area. He walked straight towards the depths for half an hour without stop, yet he has not managed to encounter a single lightning cat. However, Suyang was already well aware that there were no lightning cats in the outer area of the place before stepping into the Thunder Valley, so he wasn't surprised by their absence. They sure have perfectly cleaned out the outer perimeter, taking even the corpses with them. He wondered as he reached deeper into the valley. As Suyang got closer to the center, the thundering in the background grew louder and fiercer, like the sound of roaring dragons. Listening to the background, Suyang couldn't help but recall the time he had spent in the Dragon God Valley, where he would often hear similar sounds in the background. Dragon God Valley. The light in his eyes suddenly flashed a mysterious light, it was one filled with melancholy. Suddenly, the sound of many shrieking resounded in Suyang's ears. Although it came from somewhere afar, he was able to locate the exact location of where the scream was coming from in an instant. His figure turned into a blur, quickly followed by a sudden gust of wind. Using a foot technique from his previous life that significantly boosted his speed, he arrived at the location within seconds, traveling nearly a mile in that short time. The moment he arrived, he noticed a group of young adults all wearing the same green-colored robes, half of them being on the floor and covered in blood, and surrounding them was 5 lightning cats. These people were mostly disciples from some sect. The lightning cats had black fur and blue eyes, and they are about as big as an adult walking on their 4 limbs. Their black fur also constantly flickered with electricity, looking as though they were all covered in an armor made of lightning. When Suyang suddenly showed up, the lightning cats and the disciples there looked at him. The disciples looked at him with desperation in their gaze, hoping that he could help them escape this situation. As for the lightning cats, they stared at him with wariness and alert. Although they couldn't see his cultivation base, their beastly instincts warned them that Suyang's presence was definitely the strongest there and that he wasn't someone to be taken lightly. When the trembling disciples there noticed the lightning cats became defensive upon Suyang's arrival, their eyes glimmered with hope. Suyang retrieved the mission scroll he had received from the sect and confirmed that it did not mention how many he needed to kill before completing the mission. Although they are only at the elementary spirit realm, their monster cores should fetch some decent wealth if I sold them to some rich families. Suyang unsheathed the sword by his side as he pondered about his need for money in this world. Although his knowledge and experience were as vast as the sea, his pockets were pitifully empty. And other than the 10 gold coins he had traded with his premium points, he really has nothing noteworthy in his possession. I am extremely poor in this life, to the point where I would not be able to afford anything that could help me at my current level of cultivation. In the midst of Suyang's thoughts, the 5 lightning cats suddenly pounced at him simultaneously with the lightning element on their body glowing brightly, causing dozens of tiny snake-like white lines to fly at him like a lightning storm. Suyang's eyes flickered with a profound light, and his legs suddenly blurred, turning nearly invisible. 9 astral steps. Suyang used one of the best movement techniques he had learned in his previous life. And although he could only utilize a very tiny portion of the technique's full potential due to his insufficient cultivation base, his speed had become so fast that neither the disciples or the lightning cats could react to. He suddenly disappeared from where he stood, and with speed quicker than anyone there could blink, he appeared behind the lightning cats like a ghost. In that instant when he appeared, his arm that held the steel sword danced elegantly and sharply, executing 5 consecutive casual strikes without any technique. Blood sprayed and heads flew. The 5 lightning cats dropped to the ground without any of their heads attached. They had been killed by Suyang before the day's disciples could even realize what had happened. After killing the 5 lightning cats in the blink of an eye and ignoring the baffled disciples there, Suyang used his sword to cut open the forehead of the 2 lightning cats' head to retrieve the monster core hidden inside. 2 monster cores already. Suyang nodded to himself with satisfaction and threw the monster cores into his pockets. And just as he was able to turn and leave, one of the disciples there called out to him. "Excuse me, Savior. Although it may be too much to ask after you saved our lives, would you like to group up with us?" Suyang turned to look at the pretty girl who had called for him, who was also giving him a seductive look. After a glance at her low cultivation base that was merely at the 4th level at the elementary spirit realm, he replied in a nonchalant voice, "Hunting beasts at the peak of elementary spirit realm while you are not even qualified to step inside this Thunder Valley. What did you expect to achieve here with your cultivation base? I do not have the time to play with you or your stupid games." Suyang turned around and left after refusing to carry dead weights, his silhouette quickly disappearing from their eyes, and the pretty lady stared at the direction where he disappeared with a dumbfounded expression, her face red from embarrassment after listening to his harsh words. As Suyang traveled deeper into the Thunder Valley, fights between lightning cats and people became more common. None of these have a monster core. Suyang scanned the surroundings for lightning cats that had monster cores. Normally, one would not know if the beast they killed would have a monster core in them unless they split open its forehead. However, as for Suyang, who has knowledge and techniques used by immortals and gods, he has the ability to determine whether or not the beast would have a monster core without killing it. Oh, there's one. Once Suyang manages to find a lightning cat that was guaranteed to leave a monster core behind, he would disappear towards that direction to hunt that lightning cat, even if it was already fighting with other people. Ah. Hey. Who the fuck are you? How dare you steal our prey? Your mother. Do you have no shame? The people that were fighting with the lightning cat became enraged when Suyang suddenly appeared out of thin air and stole their kill, even obtaining a monster core out of it. Suyang only glanced at them and said in a sneering tone, "Did you really expect others to stand around and watch when there are unclaimed wealth in front of their eyes? This is the wilderness, not your backyard, and I am here to earn my wealth just like everyone else. I did not come here to stand around while everyone takes their time with these beasts." In the upper realm of the cultivation world, where immortals and gods lacked the resources to improve themselves, Suyang has witnessed and experienced for himself the fierce competitions for resources between these immortals and gods. The higher cultivation cultivators achieve, the more valuable the cultivation resource they would need to strengthen themselves due to their growing standard and hunger. Hence to Suyang, who was adapted to such struggles, he did not consider his actions as being shameless or stealing. "Do not take this personally, this is the reality of the real cultivation world," he said to them before leaving like a ghost. That's right. In the ancient eyes of Suyang, who has, for many times, fought to the death with immortals just for the chance to increase his own cultivation slightly, this mortal world has yet to experience the real cultivation world. There was no genuine struggles or fierce competition between cultivators, as there are plenty of resources in this world for the majority to share. What the fuck? Identify yourself. Do you have any idea which sect we belong to? A group of disciples stared at Suyang with angry expressions after he appeared out of nowhere and stole their prey, even reaping their reward. Suyang glanced at the group of disciples he stole the lightning cat from and shrugged. "I don't know, nor do I care," he said to them and disappeared to another location. Within hours, Suyang traversed the entire inner area of the Thunder Valley like a gust of wind. And wherever he would appear, another monster core would enter his pocket, followed by enraged reactions from those he stole the kill from. Fuck. That shameless bastard. I swear that if I ever see him again, I will beat him into a plump. But, as shameless as he was, he managed to kill the lightning cats with seemingly zero effort. Are you sure that you want to fight someone like him? Shut up. Very quickly, Suyang became famous within the Thunder Valley as a shameless thief who would steal the praise of others. The results are better than I'd expected, Suyang said as he felt his pockets that were filled with monster cores. He was pleasantly surprised to find so many lightning cats running around in this Thunder Valley. It was as though the only beast that lived in this place was lightning cats. Normally, wildernesses like this Thunder Valley would have many different types of beasts dwelling within. However, from Suyang's encounters, there were only lightning cats. What an odd phenomenon. Suyang stopped his movements and began pondering. After a few moments of thinking, he suddenly started running even deeper into the Thunder Valley, even ignoring the surrounding lightning cats with monster cores. However, right before Suyang reached the center of the Thunder Valley, the Thunder Core, he was greeted by a massive crowd of people blocking his path. These people were all wearing a pair of white robes with a picture of a golden sword sewed on their right leg, and there was at least 100 of these people standing around. What is going on here? Suyang asked one of them. This place is currently occupied by the Divine Sword Sect. Turn around and leave right this instant. When Suyang heard that they belonged to the Divine Sword Sect, he couldn't help but lift his eyebrows in surprise. Senior Zhang was clearly heading to another place when he departed with him, so what are these guys doing here in the middle of the Thunder Valley? The majority of them was at the profound spirit realm except for a few individuals that were at the true spirit realm. It was an enormous force to be reckoned with, especially at this Thunder Valley, where the majority of beasts were at the elementary spirit realm. It was an overkill. However, with so many profound spirit realms experts, the overwhelming amount of lightning cats should have been eradicated by now, yet there were still many roaming around, which meant that they were not here for the lightning cats but something else. If they are not here for the lightning cats, then it must be because of that. Suyang smiled to himself. When the Divine Sword Sect disciple saw his smile, he frowned. What the hell are you smiling about? Get lost, he said in a low and irritated voice. Get lost, huh? Suyang casually retrieved a yellow jade slip from his robe and showed it to the disciple, who suddenly shrieked in terror after seeing the jade slip, causing everybody there to look at them. My deepest apologies. The disciple suddenly dropped to his knees and began kowtowing to Suyang with a pale face. This unworthy junior have eyes but has failed to recognize Mount Tai. The place suddenly became dead silent, to the point where even a falling leaf could be heard. After Suyang showed the Divine Sword Sect the yellow jade slip Senior Zhang had given him earlier, everything went silent. Move aside, I have business with your seniors, Suyang said as he put on a profound and oppressive air, making others believe that he was a profound senior. Right away. The disciples quickly cleared a path for Suyang to walk through. Suyang nodded and began walking through the open path, and the disciples looked at the ground as he walked past them, seemingly afraid to look at him. Once he got past the crowd, Suyang continued to walk towards the center, the atmosphere growing heavier as he got closer. Who's there? A voice thundered the moment Suyang reached the center of the Thunder Valley, the Thunder Core. Suyang looked at the situation ahead of him. There were 4 figures, each emitting the aura of an expert at the Earth Spirit realm, standing around a small flower that was glowing a dark blue light in a breathing pattern. This flower was the size of a human thumb, and electricity could be seen coiling around its stem like a small snake. When Suyang first saw the flower, he showed a slight smile that went away an instant later. I will not ask you again. How did you get past my disciples, and what happened to them? Asked one of the 4 figures, an old lady in red robes with killing intent in her gaze. However, she was not the only one looking at him with hostility, as the 3 figures beside her also looked prepared to attack him at any given moment. These 4 figures knew very well that the Divine Sword Sect's disciples would not let anyone through under any circumstances, unless their hands were forced. However, who in this small eastern continent could possibly force over 100 disciples from the Divine Sword Sect to retreat? This was also why the four figures didn't immediately attack Suyang. They were all wary of his mysterious presence. I walked past them, of course. As for their safety, I did not touch anyone. Suyang said in a nonchalant voice, seemingly unfazed by the combined killing intent of 4 Earth Spirit Realm cultivators. You walked past them? How is that even possible? I gave them strict orders to not let anyone through. Can you still say that after seeing this? Suyang revealed the yellow jade slip again. Although he did not know the jade slip's purpose when he first obtained it, the reactions from the Divine Sword Sect's disciples made it clear to him that it granted him some sort of special presence within the Divine Sword Sect. And sure enough, when the 4 figures saw the yellow jade slip, their eyes nearly popped out from shock. Impossible. That's Senior Zhang's command medallion. Why does he have such a thing? You. How did you obtain that jade slip, and what is your relationship with Senior Zhang? How do we know that it's the real thing? Senior Zhang had left the sect to go to that place since 10 years ago. The 4 figures began throwing questions at Suyang, who calmly answered them one by one. I met Senior Zhang by chance, and after helping him protect Lady Z, we became best friends and he gave me this jade slip as a show of gratitude. When Suyang mentioned the surname Z, the expressions on these 4 figures changed. They no longer looked at him with killing intent, but they still held their suspicions. As for the authenticity of this jade slip, why don't you check it yourself? Suyang then threw the jade slip towards their direction. The one who caught it took a moment to examine the jade slip. Moments later, he cried out, "It's real. This is really Senior Zhang's command medallion." So what if it's real? What are you doing here? Senior Zhang shouldn't know of this operation since he hasn't been with us for over 10 years. The old lady in red robes continued to question him. Are you sure about that? I parted with Senior Zhang only recently at the entrance of this Thunder Valley. What? Senior Zhang was here? Suyang nodded and said, along with Lady Z. He then approached them in a casual manner and continued, "Do you have any idea what that flower is?" he asked them. The 4 looked at the flower and then back to Suyang and shook their heads. Indeed, they have never seen such a flower before. Despite their profound knowledge, none of them have ever seen or heard of such a flower before. However, they were certain that this flower was the cause of the phenomenon with the lightning cats in this Thunder Valley and that it was some sort of priceless treasure, hence why they plan to have this place secured until they figure out the identity of this small flower. That flower is called the Extreme Yin Flower, and it has the same effects as the Pure Yin Flower, as well as being 10 times greater in its effectiveness. 10 times greater? When the 4 figures learned about the identity of this flower, their jaws dropped from shock. The Pure Yin Flower was already considered an extremely strong medicine that could kill even Earth Spirit Realm cultivators, yet this Extreme Yin Flower was 10 times stronger? Then wouldn't this Extreme Yin Flower kill even Heavenly Spirit Realm cultivators? If consumed without a special technique, even cultivators above the Heavenly Spirit Realm would die instantly after using it, said Suyang, increasing the shock in their hearts. Even those above the Heavenly Spirit Realm? Then what are we supposed to do with this thing? If nobody in this world could use it, then wouldn't that make it useless? Asked the old lady in red robes. That is why Lady Z and Senior Zhang had sent me to this place, he replied. Although none of us here could use this Extreme Yin Flower, I'm fairly certain that Lady Z's family would find some use in it. Despite knowing nothing about Zi Xingfang's background, Suyang knew that she was someone with an incomprehensible status in this world, so he used that to his advantage in hopes to convince these 4 figures. That does make sense. If someone has the ability to handle this Extreme Yin Flower, then it would be Lady Z's family. Then if you will excuse me, I will extract this Extreme Yin Flower and return to Lady Z's side, said Suyang as he stood in front of the extreme yin flower.